published as a little pamphlet in primary writing book. And it's called Some of the Methods of Performing Poetry Employed in and Around Baltimore from the late 60s to the early teens by poets in their late teens to early 60s. David Franks jumping up onto a table to recite a poem, the Hopkins Writing Seminars, 1969. L.B. Bender reading a poem from inside a large cardboard box, the IE Reading Series, Dionysus, 2007. Blaster Al Ackerman reading a poem with a bar of soap in his mouth, The Shattered Wig, 14 Karat Cabaret, 2005. Chris Batworth-Ciotti reciting rhythmic blast of images to thousands of grunge rock fans, HF Festival, RFK Stadium, 1992. Marshall Reese picking a number from the phone book, reciting the number, and reading a poetic phrase for each digit of the number. Red Door Hall, the ailing Marshall Reese portrayed by Tentatively a Convenience, 1979. Jocelyn Garlington reading Lost Family Poem to percussion, sandwiched between dancers and comedy, Kuumba Group, Cafe Park Plaza, 1983. Rick Royer repeating each phrase of a poem 2, 3, 4 times, tonally modulating, Hamilton Arts Collective, 2009. Bonnie Jones typing words to a poem, being composed as it was typed and projected onto the wall, IE Reading Series, Clayton and Company, 2006. Teen poet Clarence Robb of the defunct Baltimore Experimental High School, spray painting his one-word poem and moniker, Cuba, all over Baltimore, mid-80s. Bruce Jacobs, reading a poem, accompanying himself on snare drum and alto sax simultaneously. The Litmore Poetry Library, Reconverted Church, 2012. Chris Toll, putting tiny books of poetry printed by Jamie Guerin Perez inside books at Borders and Barnes & Noble to be purchased unwittingly for free, 2005. Lesser Gonzalez Alvarez shining 3-word poems handwritten in capital letters onto the wall with an old-fashioned educational overhead projector, Worms, 2011. Ellen Carter and Chris Mason reading mistranslations of poems by Paul Celan over the phone to surprise citizens plucked from the white pages, 1979. Rod Smith exchanging chunks of poems for bursts of John Diker's saxophone in the basement, Madame Dragoul's 14 Karat Cabaret, 2011. Alpha Michael Weaver improvising blues poems to blues banjo accompaniment above the paint store, 1985. Joe Cardarelli and Kirby Malone chanting strings of words through macrame masks, Micah, 1976. Sharia Harris, singing the reading, reading the singing. Dictionary and the Uprising, City Lit, Inner Harbor, 2016. Prison activist and poet David Everhart performing a rap for inmates at a barbecue in the yard, 2001. Liz Downing, Mark Jickling, and Chris Mason singing poems of Sappho with banjo, guitar, and mandolin, Old Songs Group, 2000. Adam Robinson, pasting poems onto walls around Baltimore, Is Reed's Project, 2006 to 2011. watercolorist and poet Richard Sober, passing out free paintings at his poetry reading, Bread and Roses Collective Coffee House, 1978. Animal rescue worker and poet Heather Fuller, reciting names of dogs killed in dogfighting matches, i.e. reading series, composer reconstructed carriage house, 2009. M. Magnus, performing choral Heraclitus in Dionysus, his daughter spinning from table to table, spreading logos, 2007. L.B. Bender, performing David Frank's poem, My Penis, as a redo, after David Franks performs My Penis, i.e. 2006. Joe Cardarelli and Rupert Wondolowski and Michael Ball and David Bodwin and Param Anand Singh, performing the extended extemporaneous poetic introduction in whatever decades they landed in. Some poet in a Baltimore row house reading a love poem to a sweetheart who smiles in nervous bewilderment. A poet walking alone on any street in Baltimore, mumbling the lines of an unfinished poem, feet of the poet, feet of the poem. Somebody reading poems in a strange tone of voice with funny gestures whose name we forget and whose way of reading is too hard to describe, but it was great.